Okay, let's begin by examining the origin of Johnson County. This is a fairly short talk, so I'm going to give you some detail going way back to the beginning. The beginning is, that is, with the Louisiana Purchase. So in 1803, the Louisiana Purchase was made, which more or less doubled the size of the United States. So future Iowa was part of the Louisiana Territory. And when the state of Louisiana was established in 1812, to avoid confusion, the government renamed the remainder of the Louisiana Territory the Missouri Territory. In 1821, the state of Missouri was created, with its northern border later becoming Iowa's southern border. The remainder of the Missouri Territory then became known as the Unorganized Territory. So now we've been in 3 territories so far. Now in 1833, the Michigan Territory, which was established in 1805, was expanded to include that part of the unorganized territory, which would later become Iowa and other places. Shortly after this, in 1837, the state of Michigan came into being. So now another territory. In 1834, 2 large counties in future Iowa were established along the Mississippi River, Dubuque County and Des Moines County, spelled as you see them there. They spanned the entire eastern part of future Iowa. And of course, later they would be much diminished in size.
I'm sorry, did you say that all of Iowa is contained?
This is just the part that goes out to not as far as Iowa City. So just the very eastern part, you can kind of see the border on the Mississippi River. So Des Moines County, and they also called it the township of Flint Hill and the township of Julian for Dubuque County. So those were early established places. After Michigan received statehood in 1837, future Iowa was part of the Wisconsin Territory. So now another territory. In 1836 through 1837, December to December, 21 counties, all of them to be part of later Iowa, were established while part of the Wisconsin Territory, and Johnson County was one of them. Here, they were, of course, mostly in the eastern portion of the state because we hadn't expanded westward quite so much, hadn't gone to Des Moines. It was Fort Des Moines in the early days. And in 1838, the Iowa Territory was split off from the Wisconsin Territory, even though Wisconsin would not become a state until 1848, 2 years after Iowa did. And when Iowa, dark green on this map, became a state in 1846, the northern part of the Iowa Territory, light green, remained as the Iowa Territory. A lot of progressions. By now you're wondering, when's he going to get to the 1900 map? But we need to examine a few more things before we get to that. Even though the United States, quote unquote, purchased the land west of the Mississippi with the Louisiana Purchase, it wasn't until 1833, 30 years later, after the Black Hawk Purchase of 1832, that white settlement in future Iowa became legal. So it's kind of a hard thing to understand. We bought the land, but we had to push the Indians out first before we could legally settle it. So the land comprising Johnson County came by way of 3 treaties with the Native Americans as seen on the map. The first Black Hawk Purchase, the Keokuk Reserve Purchase, and finally the second Black Hawk Purchase. Johnson County was originally named for Richard Mentor Johnson, who at the time was the vice president under President Martin Van Buren. We also have a Van Buren County in Iowa. Johnson was a Kentuckian who became an Indian fighter. I can't tell you when he died, but I know it wasn't 19. and he didn't live in 1907. So, yeah, I don't know. Sir, thank you. That's a good point. Uh, Anyway, some claim he even killed, who was the famous Indian in Indiana who was killed? The tribe back in the 1830s, Tecumseh. But anyway, it is written that he had intimate relations with at least two of his slaves. In short, Johnson characterized a person not very exemplary by today's standards.
Today?
So it was around 2020 that David McCartney, a University of Iowa archivist, led a movement to change the namesake for Johnson County to that of a person who had led a more honorable, wholesome life. Lulu Merle Johnson was perhaps only the second African American woman to earn a PhD in history in the United States and the first to do so in Iowa. She was born on a farm near the tiny town of Gravity, Iowa, in the southwest part of the state. She eventually taught at several universities and also became a dean of women's students. She was an ideal candidate for the new namesake of Johnson County, and so was approved to be the official eponym by the Johnson County Board of Supervisors on June 24th, 2021. So almost 3 years now. The shape of Johnson County changed in the 19th century. It started out as nearly rectangular, with the exception of this little step right here. Then in 1845, the boot heel, if you will, was changed to follow the course. I'm sorry, it lost this portion of the county in 1845 or 1839. So for 6 years, it was like this. Then the so-called boot heel was changed to follow the course of the Iowa River. So it gained back a little bit of land. So that happened in 1845, and it's been that shape all the way to the present. Now, a side note about the small step that we see right here. You notice it says correction right there. As we go westward in Iowa, that little step gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And down here, we see it in the southwestern portions of these counties, goes from small, bigger, 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 bigger. It's due to a survey phenomenon, survey corrections, which were made from the fifth principal meridian, which is where this red line is here. I don't fully understand how it all worked out, and then think of also, you cannot display the surface of the world on a flat surface. It has things to do with projections, but it is a surveying type of a thing that happened. Now, let's begin to study the map itself. The most prominent thing we observe is the 21 multicolored divisions that are named in capital letters like Hardin, Scott, and Union. These are the 21 townships in Johnson County. In the United States, a township is a subdivision which is at most 36 square miles in area. Often a township is not very square and doesn't have an area of 26 square miles. An example of this is Jefferson Township at the northern part of Johnson County, which has its southern boundary the course of the Iowa River. But as we examine Washington Township in the southwestern corner, it is 36 square miles. Each square mile is called a section, a term we're familiar with, used such as, my friend John farms a section in Washington County. So it's a square mile, 640 acres, I think. Each section is numbered beginning at the northeast corner and ending in the southeast corner. Townships once had more functions, such as the maintenance of country schools and road maintenance. Today, they serve in the capacities of fire protection, cemetery management, and fence management, including boundary dispute management. Each township has trustees and a clerk that are all elected officials. Let's look at country schools, which in the past were maintained by township governments. Looking at Big Grove Township in northern Johnson County, I've circled a small square labeled school right here. They showed schools with little black squares. This school is still present and has received the moniker of the Stone Academy. You'll notice where it is here. Here's Schulein. And this is Highway 1 coming out of Schulein. So it's a couple of miles north of Schulein. It was known as Big Grove Township School Number 1, believed to have been built in 1842, 3 years after the founding of Iowa City and 2 years after Schulein was platted. Stone Academy remained a school until 1953, I read, and is one of the oldest surviving school buildings in Iowa. And whereas typical schools of the era were built of wood, this one was made from limestone. Would anyone care to guess how many country schools are identified in total on the 1900 map? Of all the townships, how many do you think? Again?
It's just in Johnson.
Just Johnson County. How many? It's a good guess. There are a lot of them. Turns out there are 145 broken down by township, as I've shown you here. It varied, but they're, they averaged out to be, or the most common was probably somewhere 7, 8, 9. Country churches are also found on the map, but much smaller number than schools. So here's a typical array. They're well spaced geographically. This is in Cedar Township, where we have these 10 schools. It would be interesting to study and see if there's anything left of any of these schools in the county. I have not researched that at all. Other prominent features on the map are towns that no longer exist. Here are South Liberty and Bonaccord PO Post Office in Liberty Township. These might be called ghost towns today, but in the strictest sense of the term, a ghost town might have some visible remaining buildings or infrastructure. But loosely applied, I think people might refer to these places as ghost towns, even when nothing remains. Found out that South Liberty was laid out in 1857, and Bonaccord was probably just the post office for South Liberty from 1859 to 1897, but it's still on this map. Both of these were west of what was called the Hill Siding, which is a term no doubt due to the rail line that ran down the Burlington and Northern Railroad, Burlington, Cedar Rapids and Northern. The curiosity is Schulein Post Office at the southernmost part of the county. Shoofly pie, a common name for a plant species, a temporary short routing around an obstruction. I don't have any record of why it was called that, but the name may have been offered by Mr. Brainerd, a one-time postmaster of Iowa City. Here are some of the ghost towns or past towns, if you prefer, on the 1900 Johnson County map. And there were at least 20 other such places that were established before 1900, but were absent on the 1900 map. Some of these also had PO after them, but I didn't get them all on there. I've circled the area where Swisher is located today, but it was absent in 1900. It would be right here, just west of Schuleville, a mile or two. And there's a reason, of course, for that. In 1904, Swisher was created, along with the founding of the Krandic, the Cedar Rapids and Iowa City Railway. The Krandic was an interurban railroad between Cedar Rapids and downtown Iowa City. There were about 27 miles of track. The train made as many as 60 stops between the cities, ending in Iowa City, making a complete loop around the block of today's old Capitol Center. And passenger service on the Krandic ended in 1953 after ridership had declined significantly. One of the passengers on that very last train was Alfred Scales of Iowa City, who had also ridden on the very first train in 1904. Now let's look at some of the features around Iowa City. Minnehaha is seen along the Iowa River northwest of Iowa City right here. Well, today there's the Elks Club golf course area. Minnehaha it was established in 1898. The name given by a P.J. Regan, who was an Iowa City businessman who built a summer resort hotel there. He called it Minnehaha. And there was a dinner club in conjunction with Minnehaha. And in 1900, he established the first golf course in Iowa City. And in the 1940s, it evolved into the Iowa City Country Club, I think, and then was bought by the Elks in the 40s. And so the 9-hole course that we see up there is almost like it was laid out in 1900, without the benefit of all the earth moving equipment we have today. They have changed a couple of the holes around with the other construction went there. Anyway, Minnehaha was the name of a Native American woman used by Longfellow in his epic poem, The Song of Hiawatha. The name's been used for waterfalls, parks, and lakes in many parts of the United States. And Regan provided horse-drawn carriages to and from his resort, and people could also boat up and down the river at a boat launch that was by Minnehaha. And then that went out of business in the early 1900s, not too many years afterwards. I can't remember quite when it was. Interesting name. Now, just east of Iowa City, but not adjoining, is East Iowa City, right here. You see the space between, which will later be filled in by the Rundle or Rundell addition. And East Iowa City was named by Willard Main, a businessman, when he platted the town in 1898. It was to be the site of what Maine called the largest jewelry factory west of the Mississippi River, or even the largest in the entire country, according to his claim. East Iowa City had as its street on the north, the Rock Island tracks on the south, First Avenue on the east, and 7th Avenue on the west. Now we know why First Avenue progresses from east to west, opposite what you would expect in a town going from the center of town area outward, because it was a separate community, and that's how Maine decided to name the streets. Maine built the factory, which was not particularly long-lived, and then he carried out an aggressive newspaper advertising campaign to sell lots in East Iowa City. He used all sorts of amusing ways to promote the sale of lots. After the Rundle addition was added in 1908, connecting East Iowa City, and in 1910, when the area of Iowa City doubled in one fell swoop, East Iowa City was no longer a rural town, but in addition absorbed into Iowa City. It wasn't until the 1950s that the real estate, that it was developed, at least houses were built. The greatest growth took till the 1950s. And that's about the time Hoover School came in. It was in the 50s, right nearby. At the same time that the jewelry factory was built, two other manufacturing concerns began in Iowa City. The Western Division of the O.S. Kelly Company opened a large factory on Sheridan Avenue for the manufacture of small gasoline engines and farm implements. Kelly had a pretty short life, with the building later occupied by a canning factory. Other businesses finally advanced drainage systems. Some of you may remember that factory. that occupied the space from 1959 to 1992, when it was raised to make way for housing. It was a pretty big building. Also in 1899, the Bernard Fry Perfume and Extracts Company opened their factory on South Gilbert Street. Berner was an early pharmacist in Iowa City, ran a downtown drugstore for a long time. Some of you might remember the Berner name, and it was on University Heights near the end there. Isn't that where Stella's restaurant is, or right by that? He became the first dean of the University College of Pharmacy, having been instrumental in its founding. After Bernard Fry left in around 1915, two different hotels occupied the building. In fact, the name Davis for Davis Hotel can still be seen on the side of the west side of the building above Gabe's.
So the building is still there.
Building's still there. Very long, narrow building, about 20 feet wide, east to west, and then a couple 100 feet long. Unusual shape. What was the other hotel? Anybody remember? I can't quite remember what it was, but it was two different hotels. Yeah, different. Yeah. A few miles west of Iowa City, we find Poor Farm here on Snooks Grove Road, later renamed Melrose Avenue. The Poor Farm was established in 1855 for impoverished, I think mostly mentally handicapped people, and they worked on the farm to the extent that they were able to help defray the costs for their care by the county. Both dairy and crops were included in the operations until the 1960s. So does anybody remember that it was working in? Okay, you have maybe something to share after. A few early buildings survive, and it's now an historic site. A subtle feature on the 1900 map is this sharp bend in the Iowa River. So if we look at the 1900 map, it's depicted pretty accurately, whereas today it's a nice smooth loop. Over the years, severe erosion was taking place as the river cut into the bank while trying to make the sharp turn. And in 1939 through 40, the Works Progress Administration project helped fund the rounding out of the bend into what it is today. In 1877, the Burlington, Cedar Rapids, and Northern Railroad built an extension into Iowa City off its main north-south route that ran north and south, east of Iowa City. So here it is, it's coming in, makes a big loop. It hits East Iowa City. It had a little spur line into the jewelry factory, made a big loop around and came down and went toward Hills. It handled both freight and passengers, with its depots at the site of today's Robert A. Lee Rec Center. And we can see remnants of the line, and the actual rail, some of the rail lasted into the 60s, other than the stuff that goes down to Hills that crosses Highway 6. It might be part of that same original thing, but up further north in Iowa City around Jefferson Street, there were some remnants and they served a lumber yard up into the 1960s. It ran roughly down the eastern part of Friendship Street, then south of East Jefferson, cut the corner by the Black Angel restaurant on Iowa Avenue, and then, of course, past the New Pie on Van Buren, past the Rec Center. Here are the freight and passenger depots. Passenger here, freight here. And this street here is Burlington Street. That became Highway US 6 until the bypass was built in 1958. This photograph was probably made in the 50s, would you say? 40s, 50s, even somewhere in there. And this is the building that now has the Black Angel. Many of you remember it more as the Lou Henry restaurant, many other restaurants over the years. It's where Midtown started. There were Maid-Rites 2 different times. But this building was built in 1930. It suffered some remodeling. There was an explosion there when a guy, I think it was Brad Mallory, ran the place and was killed, died shortly after the explosion. But it was built as the home oil company in 1930 by Doc Mile. It was known as Doc, Mighell, pronounced Mile. And they opened, he and his wife, a little takeoff in words, the 2 Mile Restaurant was what this was first called. And the reason we see the building angled off yet today was because the train ran very close to the building. It cut that corner, and this was, of course, built much after the rail line came in. And the gas pumps were on the other side here, and so they had to be traffic when going in and out of there. Here are the remnants of a massive embankment along the area that was called Elmira, northeast of Iowa City. And that was part of this railroad, the BCRN. Some people called it the plug. And this grassy passageway here is where the railroad line went. The rails went through here. This is College Street. So if you're on 7th Avenue going north and turn west, left onto College, just about a block past that, look off, angled to your right, and that's where the rail, and this is evidence of the tracks right here. That's the Morningside area of Iowa City. These arrows point to the Mississippi and Missouri Railroad, its original name when it came at the end of 1855. And not long after it became the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific. And I had a friend who took the train to Des Moines for business and really thought that was pretty neat because he could get over there, go back same day. It was very handy. And we had passenger service until 1970. That was the last year. And of course, the Iowa Interstate Railroad now owns the line. Up in Cedar Township, we can see a bridge up here. And this is the Sutliff Bridge. Alan Sutliff established a ferry boat service in around 1838. But eventually sandbars formed, making his ferry operation impossible. So he built the bridge, but not till 1898. And at the time, it was the longest bridge in Johnson County. I remember after Vivian and I moved to Iowa City, we traveled over the bridge several times on the way to, we called it Sutliff's, the tavern and restaurant. And the wooden planks would be rumbling beneath the car as you went over. Many of you probably had a similar experience. In 2008, the flood badly damaged. Well, there it is completed. I don't know if this was after the restoration or before, but that part was lost, for a time. And then they found money to reopen it 4 years after the damage. I remember being with a group of men, and I was the only one who thought it should be restored. Maybe that's the preservationist in me, but anyway, they have restored it for foot traffic. I don't know if they allow bicycles across it. Do you know, Glenn? Yes. So, okay, yeah. I'd like to conclude, since it's pretty short, by looking at population changes in the 7 principal cities in Johnson County. The 7 that would have anything of a population to speak of. So let's take a look. Let's start with the towns in order, going from the least change to the most change, comparing 1900 and now. Oxford, we can see, I'd call it pretty flat. Now, there wasn't much of an increase. Some of these towns would increase, decrease a little bit and so forth, but pretty flat. Lone Tree has grown, it's doubled since 1900, which isn't saying a lot for the small amount of the population. Iowa City has grown by roughly 10 times in population in those 120 years. Solon similarly has gone in absolute numbers, not a lot, but that's quite an increase from 400 to 3,000. Now, if we look at Tiffin, and we look at that in another way in a moment, that has grown 26 times in its population. And most recently has really gotten a growth spurt. North Liberty has grown 120 times since 1920 in absolute numbers and population. The one that takes the cake, of course, is Coralville, which has grown 175 times. In 1900, its census population was only 125. There wasn't much to Coralville. So there they are kind of all together. So if you look at it this way, the towns that have had the biggest growth in the last 10 years, that is between the censuses of 2010, 2020. Coralville didn't gain a whole lot in just those 10 years. North Liberty, they gained what? Say a little over 3,000. North Liberty gained almost 7,000. They gained 7,000. And Tiffin only gained 2,500, but that has really blossomed. But North Liberty, of course, has been such an area of expansion and growth. So yeah, look at that. They on the verge of doubling in 10 years from 2010. And since 2000, just 2000, they've grown almost 4 times. And since 2000. What was North Liberty back in 19? Well, I don't have those other, you can find the decade by decade census figures on Wikipedia. Just look up any town and they have it under demographics. And of course, even worse is University Heights. Since the 1970s or so, they've been completely surrounded by Iowa City, considering the University of Iowa and neighboring property to be part of Iowa City. And I've read where, is this true? University Heights may be the only city in the United States that's completely surrounded by only one city. I don't know that. That's an interesting. Yeah.
Well, other cities
Well, the
have.
Vatican is surrounded by Rome, but.
Listen.
That
Hamtramck, Michigan is surrounded by Detroit.
Is it?
Sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
Anybody remembers the Mormon history?
The Mormon history?
You know, the Mormon truck. Yeah, they always said I came to Iowa City because that was the end of the line. That you didn't see the area.
Yeah, it was. And when yes, Mormons came here shortly after 1855, when we were at the end of the line. It was 5 years later that we made our way to Oxford, I think. I think it took another 5 years. But yes, and then they launched hand carts from here. But the earlier Mormons who came through before that were in wagons.
Thought was that was the end of the line.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
A comment on Summit Street. It has some beautiful old homes. Must have been built. The elite area.
A lot of there's some mid 1800s and late 1800s buildings. Named Summit because of its height above the river, I think. That's how Irving Weber thought it got the name. What about it though? Otherwise, you have a comment on
Mention this later. Farmer from East Johnson County, Joshua Secret, who was quite successful about buying a house there.
is there a Secret's barn? You're not the gentleman who's going to talk on the barn by Downey? Okay, yeah. Yeah, we had an email exchange. Yeah, thanks. Yes.
Summit Street and Wood Avenue
Street, are those listed on these early maps?
Summit Street is not. I don't think they're on the, well, wait a minute. Were they on the original plat? I'm trying to think. Well, that's where the marker is though, on Summit and Court. Walnut. No, I don't think, they weren't on the original plat. That only went out to about Governor, I think, as far as to the east.
Well, there's a house on Walnut Street that was actually built in 1840s, very close to the time the Lucas Farm was in existence. It was actually the house where one of their farm workers was living. Because I've never seen a map.
Is the house still here? Where is it located? 913 Walnut?
Which one?
That would be west of Summit?
Yeah, it's just west. The original building was actually a house built out of limestone. And now, I mean, there's the expansion of that house.
Oh, that's great.
Original building was, stone, basically.
Yeah. Wasn't aware of that one. That's great. Thanks. Good.
Right now, but you look at the construction side, all still there.
And they restorated.
Actually, it was added on. Added on. It looks like a regular house now, built maybe at the end of the 19th century, and wanted to build onto it. But it does date back to that period, but I've never seen anything on the map, on an old map, I've never seen them.
And outside the city limits of when it was built, new.
Yeah.
And on the original map, they didn't mark on the 1839 plat, nothing was, there wasn't anything to mark really in the original city limits.
Do you know where all the limestone came from?
A lot of it nearby. Some of it
In the old capital.
Some of it was near the president's house on that bank of the river. And a lot of it, I think, also came from further north on property of what would be considered the reservoir now, off of, what's that road called? The Mahaffey Bridge Road area. But they mined a lot of it locally, most of it probably.
If you look at the old Capitol, there's two different types of limestone that just came from two different quarries. The first one was
Yep.
owned by the president's house. If you look at the building, you can see it's not as good a quality. And so at a certain point, they said this limestone isn't good enough. That's where they went to the second quarry you're talking about, Tom. Finish that building.
Also, the University of Iowa Press building on Park Road, which is probably, it could be the oldest building in Iowa City, in current Iowa City. It wasn't when it was built. That's a limestone structure with walls that are maybe a couple of feet thick at the ground level.
You say that jewelry factory?
On Chaddock Green, do you know where Chaddock Green is on Friendship Street? The park area? That's where it was built, right there. Well, the building itself till 1937 when it burned. And a tremendously big fire when it was full of seed corn. And Carl Chaddock said it smoldered for a year afterwards, but it was built in 1900, burned in 1937. It became a factory for other things. Temporarily, it served as a pearl button factory when people were on strike in Muscatine, model airplanes, furniture. Bernard Fry moved there after they moved out of Washington Street. A lot of different things. And then Carl Chaddock acquired the land. I don't know quite when, but I think he started in business around 1928 in town, and he lived to be 100. I saw him driving his dump truck well into his 90s, roaring down Jefferson one one day, passed me up. He's a nice fellow. Carl Chaddock. Yeah. Would you like to make some comments about? Oh, yes. Lucas Farms. Tell me where Lucas Farms that you're talking about are. Oh, yeah, you mean the Plum Grove? Oh, that show it, yeah, I think so. I think on the 1870 map of Iowa City, I think they do identify Plum Grove, the Lucas property. Well, you can probably find us somewhere online. If you look, I'm not quite sure. Google Images possibly. Yes.
I have a question, but to what you were asking, there is a list on the neighborhood associations, because I think contact on Facebook, and they have a walking tour. Has anybody run into towns, or maybe just stores from Iowa City South to River Junction, Stumptown? There were like 7 of them, I was told, and they were like Bokertown and Jokerville, and anybody else ever heard of those before?
Must have been local names that didn't appear on the map. So Mike, you might want to talk after this gentleman does about your map a little bit. Next week, I'm going to talk about the book that came out that I was the author of and what it took into the process of making such a book and a little bit about it. So that'll be next week. Yeah.
So,
Yep.
one of the early farmers, Johnson County, was Joshua Seeker. He came here and early before him, the price of land for him started off with $1.25 an acre. And Joshua Seekers came later and bought about 50 acres and then expanded in eastern Johnson County, just a mile west of the train station.
Not Downey. Downey, yeah.
So I've been restoring the Seacrest 1883 Octagonal Barn, 1 mile west of Downey, 4 miles east of here. There's no barn like it in the world. I've had several grants from the State Historical Society, hundreds and hundreds of volunteers. It's open every single day for free. On the 29th of April, I'll be giving a talk at the Coralville Public Library at 6 p.m. There is now in the Coralville Public Library that I put in there yesterday, several different artifacts from farming and homes at that time with numbers, and you're supposed to try and tell me and guess what they are. I'm not quite sure what they are. But again, April 29th.
That's a Monday,
Barn talk. On the following Saturday at 12 noon, I'll provide a tour of the barn. If you want to bring a lunch or 1 o'clock or so, the barn's open every single day for free. I'm not trying to make money from it. Again, hundreds of volunteers. The Historical Society has funded much of the restoration. And I brought some brochures with me as well.
So there's always someone there to have it open. Is that right?
There's
Okay.
a farmhouse from the 1860s.
I don't know if you had some security measures. Okay. Yeah.
Everybody take care of themselves. So there's a farmhouse that was built in the 1850s and added on to, but I lived in there for a while. I don't live in there now, but I've got some renters there that are just hanging out basically. But the barn is open every single day for free. That's really good. Nothing like it in the world. And a terrible job.
What makes it such that there's nothing like it in the world?
Bell-shaped roof. So there's round barns are primarily a Midwestern phenomena, but this is octagonal. But what's particularly special about it is it's built with arches, and then as opposed to just a bell-shaped roof, which there are many, the architect Frank Longerman put on an extra layer of these laminated boards, making a bell shape. And that's what makes it unique. There's 3 levels. 200 tons of blue hay, the upper level, storage in the middle and room for the horses and cows.
You said 200 tons of,
Loose hay.
200 tons. Oh. 200 tons.
Be on Saturday after the barn. Yeah, before what time? 12 noon. I have no more brochures.
Downey, I think, was an attorney in town, a businessman, and this was Downey's house up here in the corner. It still exists. It's where the glass goes. Bruce and what was her name? What?
Florence.
Yeah, she was a realtor up on North Johnson Street, north of Brown Street. So Downey was named for that Hugh Downey.
Downey is just outside of Dunn County. And when I started my restoration, one of my many stories was that I thought I'd have a town picnic for the town of Downey in the barn. And I knocked on a few people's homes and said, I'm Rich Tyler, I'm restoring the octagonal barn. And they all said yes or no. And I said, somebody in town, I'd like to have a town picnic, is, unincorporated. And they all said this woman who lived in the corner was in charge. So I knocked on her door and I said, I'd like to have a town picnic. Is that okay? And she said, I'll think about it.
Well, they used to have town picnics right in Downey. There's a little building right beside where the bank used to be.
Right.
And every year, once a year, they would have a little thing right there. Cause I used to live in Downey.
Oh, good. So anyways, to finish the story, I asked her and she said, I'll think about it. So I actually came back a week later and she said, it's okay, we can have a town picnic there. So I made little invitations and brochures and put them in all the post office, all the builders home. And later realized that's a federal crime. So
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah.
The bank in Downey, I heard that it got robbed by the James gang after they got shot up in Minnesota. But I never actually found any written document about that. It's just a local story.
there's some wonderful pictures of how they moved the safe from the train into the bank. They built a bridge over the road and pushed it in through the front window of the bank.
Mike, do you want to speak to this at all and the map or?
For people to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, please do. It's very detailed and crisp, very crisp. I brought my version, which is some kind of a photocopy of it. It's very poor. So if I find one like that, I'll want to latch onto it. You can probably find that in Google Images or somewhere, but you may not be able to zero in and get the detail of that. So, yeah. I bet it is. Let's see. No, we don't go down far enough. We've got Wyoming Road, which is Kirkwood, Sumner. Yes, it is. It's right here, Plum Grove, ex-Governor Lucas. Yeah, there we go. Supposedly because it was a grove of plum trees, I guess. It's the only thing you ever hear, but yeah, so it just made the map there. So that's 1854. It's a nice map. And that one goes out and shows, see, it shows Governor, but it doesn't even label Summit. Summit Street's not even labeled on there.
This Van Buren, then past Van Buren, Johnson or Dodge or any of that.
Well, it does. It's got Van Buren, Johnson, Dodge, Lucas, and Governor. And that's where it ends. It has the cemetery. The beginning, the little bit of Oakland Cemetery, it started out as about a square block.
Out of the original city plot.
You don't think so, but you know that obelisk is there, which is the, well, I think it was put up in 1839, but I'm not positive. Oh, yeah, it may or may not say. Put it in there, but I don't remember. Right. Well, I'm interested in the house that she mentioned on Walnut Street. It's in the very first block off of Summit, north or south side? South side. Is it, how does it appear today? Is it all brick? So what you're saying is the core of it, or the original part, so it belies its age as we see it now. It doesn't look, okay. Okay. Well, that's similar to a house that's on the corner of 7th Street and Muscatine, the southeast corner. That house may date to the 1840s. The inside structure of it. Another one would be the one that's by Rose Hill, the one that's by Reno Park that Babs owns, a lady named Babs. And it was originally a log cabin that Captain Irish had, and they built around it. Supposedly some of the wood structure of that cabin is still inside visible near the dining room. That would be like 1840s. And he built his brick house, we think in 1850 on Davenport, that's still there. And a lady has been in there. There's a family in there for a long, long time. So we have other things like that. And also the house that's on Lynn and Brown Street, southwest corner, was thought to be the first tavern, like around 1839. And some of the wood of the basement, possibly some remnant of that house from, so it's kind of the same thing that you're talking about, I think. But I did not know about that one. That's great.
That whole area.
Okay, not too far away. Right.
A lot of acres.
Yeah, I don't, 10 maybe, 14 or something.
At South Beach Street and Lafayette on the corner there. When they wrote that article about that, it was a limestone house. I thought they said it was built in like 1836. With that one, so
It's doubtful. Since we didn't,
it's supposed to have a small jail, limestone jail that was out back. And it was supposed to be a stagecoach on.
Yeah.
Right, they would tear that down and put it on.
we had a stage stop, I think, right across from here. Remember, they used to have a plaque. It was kind of a little brick wall, low brick wall, right on the edge of the bank lot there. And it had a plaque about the stagecoach, but that's gone.
And then I've got all the Irving references.
Yeah.
But I don't see no article in that book at all about that house.
Hmm.
I can't find. Like I said, I know the press service that made it, because I read it. When they tore that down, and like I said, I think that was like 64 or 65 for that house.
I know all the market houses still.
Oh, I think he built some in the late 1920s and all the way up into possibly the early 40s. He moved to Texas. I think that's where he was when he died. He was not trained as a builder, and he got a degree in political science at the University of Iowa and was in business with another man in I think it was an auto parts business in the mid-20s. Then they decided to build houses, and Bruce Glasgow might have been a nephew, and he worked for the Moffats for a while. And they've supposedly built something over 100 houses in town. You know, maybe most notably those little cottages on Muscatine, but a lot of them with stone exterior brick from stone fireplaces and so forth, and a lot of the rooms without any square corners. They're all, and a lot of interesting materials have been used in their construction, like a railroad rail for a beam in a house, or toilet seats on the wall instead of wood lath, the plaster over. And there's some chair pieces on one on 7th Avenue on the exterior as sort of trim along the fascia I've seen. Really interesting stuff. But they're still around, and some people, they're kind of prized in some ways. The man who really checked into that was the botany professor. What was his name? But he's talked. His last name is a little more complicated, but he's lectured on it quite a bit. On Moffat. He gave you his name, but I can't remember. What was that man's name? Oh, yeah, and I went in, he showed me around his house. This man is, it's on Rundle or Rundell, near the north end by Muscatine, I think, and it's on like 7 or 8 levels, he said. He showed me some of them, you just step up about 1 step and different things, and he said a little girl was going to come up there for Halloween, and she told her father, no, a real witch lives there. It looks kind of like it's out of Grimm's fairy tales or The Hobbit or something. It's very interesting.
Where I could actually take that map and have somebody look at it to see if it's an original or not.
I'd try somebody at the university. I'd try special collections. Ask them if they know any conservators there or map people. You know, there's a map room, but I don't think that lady who runs it would know that. But there might be somebody you could tie in with from the university. It would be interesting to know when it was printed. Yeah. They could probably help steer you somewhere. 3rd floor of the main library has an area called Special Collections. Special Collection. The University Library down on Madison Street. On Madison Street between Washington and Burlington. Right. Yeah. I would go there. Yes. Yes, that's right. Mary Bennett, who retired recently, would have been a good person for that. I don't know anybody there who would have her knowledge right now, but yeah, that's a good idea. I know Charles, yeah. Uh-huh.
What did you say the other place was other than
The State Historical Society. You know where that building is, don't you, Mike? On Iowa Avenue and Gilbert. Yep. Yeah, just south of the Unitarian Church, other corner. Yep.
I own Gilbert. 1 block from here. 2 blocks from here.
Northeast corner, Mike. Kitty corner, or as Webb would say, catty corner from the parking ramp. Just east of the Brain Sciences building, new building.
I got.
Oh. Can you tell us more about the silent auction? Where was it? What kind of a It wasn't a crowded closet. They actually have a book so you can see what the bids were, can't you? When you make your bid. You put it in the book, yeah. Oh, they had it there, good. That's nice. Yeah. Y'all know about Crowded Closet, probably. That's a great place. Just the man I was looking for. You know the Crowded Closet? Yeah. Yeah. What? What about it? Oh, who does not know about the Crowded Closet? Oh, it's a thrift store. It's run by the Mennonite Central Committee, MCC thrift shop. And it's where the old Kmart building was in Iowa City. If you remember where Kmart was, if you don't, it's south of the little branch bank of the Midwest one on Highway 6 there. Right off of Keokuk.
Right now, the new Quick Star.
Yeah, you know where that new Quick Star is? Yeah. And they started out, I'm not sure if they started there, but they were, what was the street? Gilbert Court? In a place where there had been a grocery store. Yeah. And it's very nice. They have books, lots of clothing, glassware, tchotchke, paintings, CDs, it's all sorts of things. Yeah. Yeah, kind of what you'd see in the Salvation Army Goodwill. Very good prices, and yet they make a lot of money. They do very well for their cause, missions. But I found a lot of books there that like Iowa City books and yeah, good place. Great.
Also, they got, like I said, stuff like that, they pull off to the side.
Mhm.
They got a whole little area where you just put a bid on that stuff. I mean, if you like it, and it goes from, you put a bid, and that bid is good for a week if anybody bids up before that. So you gotta go in there every week to make sure somebody don't bid you. I got messed out of something when they were having the big snowstorm we had here. They actually weren't coming in and opening up or anything, and I didn't realize that you could call in. And somebody called in and overbid me and I didn't know it, so. Walked out.
Somebody called in. Oh, okay.
Couldn't fit in 20 cents more than me.
No, you gotta bid at least $1 on some items, you gotta bid at least $5 or $10 on something like that. But other side, it's just a minimum of $1 to get the bid.
Right.
They sell everything for $7.
Pardon?
Just all the clothes and everything for $7.
No, for all different.
Can I take another picture
Oh.
of your map here?
Oh, yeah. Might get some reflection there
No,
too.
that's all right. Cause I actually live here and I know I'm in Hardin flat thing, but I must be,
Close Grove.
it might be that little tiny green, well, here, right there. Oh, I see, that's all in Hardin. Yeah, it's right below, I live up here, right?
You do it currently?
Yes, yeah,
Oh, okay. Now
but
it says there's a church. Do you
There's
know
a
if there,
church.
is there still a church there?
yeah, St. Peter's Church.
Is it quite old? Before 1900, do you think?
I don't know.
But it might be that very church, or they maybe replaced it with another church.
Yeah, it looks nice from the
So there's
outside.
great cemetery.
There's cemetery still there.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a cemetery there and then there's a cemetery right here, which is that.
Yeah, they probably don't have everything on there. This was a company out of Davenport, Iowa that did this. Yeah,
Like maps.
yeah. Good. There's nothing more to say, really.
Said it all. You've said it all.
I've said it all.